Kia ora, lovely people, Markie here. Somebody has asked me about managing triggers. Particularly, they were talking about how can you go through the process of addiction recovery without getting triggered. So I thought I'd do a video in response to that. The answer really is, well, there's a short answer, which is kind of you can't, and a long answer, which is along the lines of you probably won't be triggered as much as you think you will by the process of recovery from addiction, because a good recovery resource for addiction, whether it's a book or a video or counselling or group work, shouldn't really be focusing too much on the stuff that you're addicted to. It should be focusing on the recovery, and the recovery is different. There are areas where triggers can come up, mainly when you're talking about triggers. So the most wonderful thing about triggers. So the most important thing, really, in a way, it doesn't matter as if you have a good program in place for managing triggers. So that's what I would suggest, really, that the best way is not to worry about not being triggered so much, but think about an overarching plan for managing triggers. I've touched on this in another video, which is talking about, which you might want to watch as well, which is talking about what to do if triggers appear after a long time of not having any triggers and they take you a bit by surprise. So I've covered some of the same material in here. So if you've already watched that video, you've probably heard some of what I'm going to say, but there'll probably be the odd extra little nugget, so it's worth sticking with me if you've got the time. Why not? We'll have a nice chat together. So everybody gets triggered in recovery. Everybody gets cravings, and everybody gets triggered. And getting triggered is okay. Never think of being triggered as a bad thing. It's what you do next that counts. Just see getting triggered as a normal thing. So don't catastrophize about it, and don't ignore it. There's a middle ground, which I'll explain. And I suppose I like to put triggers into context and talk about, define triggers, really. So a trigger is anything at all. So it can be a person, it can be a movie, it can be a song, it can be a place, it can be the weather, it can be a mood, it can be a memory, they can be internal or external, anything at all that puts you in a state of mind where you have a desire to pick up your addictive behaviour or substance. Okay. A craving, you could really say a craving is a subset of a trigger, really. It's helpful to distinguish between the two at the very least. So a craving is much more physical and visceral. So when you are thirsty, you feel it in your body. It's not like a thought that you've decided, I haven't drank any water for ages. Wouldn't it be a great idea if I go and get some water? That would be the equivalent of a trigger for water. So craving is like a hunger or a thirst. It comes from within the body. It's an urge that it comes. It's physical. The thing with craving, we'll do another video about cravings. We can go into a bit more depth about that. But both are normal. And neither should excite panic. And the thing that's also common between the two is that you do not have to act on them. The thing about a craving is it makes you think in the moment because you can mistake it for a thirst. Now, a thirst won't go away unless you drink. That's very true. And a hunger won't go away unless you eat. But a craving for some other thing, for your source of addiction, will go away, and they do go away, and actually they generally last a very short time, about 20 minutes. So people, they can keep coming back. You can't have waves of them. So people think, oh, I'm going to have to have a drink, or I'm going to have to take a drug, or I'm going to have to use pornography, whatever your addiction is, to make it go away, and that's not true. So I'll draw a line under cravings for now there, and we'll come back to that one in another video, which which might be soon, might be in years' time. But if you're in a hurry for me to do that, let me know. If you're feeling like you need that now. So triggers. So I like to think of triggers dividing them into two different types. So there are indirect triggers and direct triggers. Okay. So, but it's not what you think. Okay. So a direct trigger for a recovering alcoholic is an advertisement for wine, beer, whatever it might be, that comes on the television, or you happen to see. Not looking for it. You're not going out of your way for that to happen, but you see it. And in fact, an advertisement is a designer trigger. That's what it's designed to do. That's a direct trigger. An indirect trigger is a crisis or the death of someone close, bad news, bad weather, good weather, happy memories, sad memories. Essentially, an indirect trigger is something that affects your mood, and then your habitual pattern is to try and fix your mood with your drug of choice or behaviour of choice that fed your addiction. So that's why it's indirect, because there's three things going on. So with the advert for an alcoholic product, immediately takes your mind to alcohol. That's the direct link there. Indirect triggers change your mood. They stimulate a mood, which could be a positive mood, which makes you think of celebration, and then that there's a connection to using your drug of choice, or an unhappy mood, an unpleasant mood, lonely, sad, angry, whatever it might be, that you want to fix by drinking. So there's an extra element in there. That's why it's indirect. Okay, so sometimes people get a bit confused by that because direct triggers can be quite subtle. So this is where it can get a bit confusing. Okay, so for example, a sunny day can be a direct trigger if it makes you think of beer gardens, and then beer gardens makes you think of alcohol, because it's going straight to the alcohol. There's not a mood state in between it. Whereas a sunny day could induce a certain mood state, positive or negative, and then you want to fix the mood state. So an indirect trigger can be, so direct triggers and indirect triggers can be the same things, but they're just working in a different way. Okay. So in a way, it doesn't really matter, as long as you know that a trigger is something that makes you think of, prompts a desire for using, or creates a mood state that is likely to make you think that because it's been a habit for so long, that the only way you're going to change that mood state or improve that mood state or celebrate that mood state is to act out with your drug or behaviour of choice. Because that's what addiction is all about. It's fixing emotions. So there's only two things you can do with triggers. Is you can avoid them or you can manage them. Well, there's three things you can do with them actually. You can act on them. You can get a trigger, you can think, oh, I've been triggered, and then you can just go and relapse, or lapse is actually the correct term, but that's another thing for another video. So, and what you choose to avoid and manage needs to be changeable. It's something that needs to be reviewed on a regular basis, okay, because that will change. So let me explain that. So when you're in the early days of recovery, you're more vulnerable. So that's the time where you want to wall yourself off, lock yourself in a monastery or whatever it might be. Take yourself to a safe place where you're avoiding all the triggers, while you're in that delicate space. Provided you're doing some recovery work. Just avoiding your triggers for a short space of time and not doing any recovery work is a waste of time. That's just that's just delaying the inevitable. But if you take yourself to a place where the triggers are removed and do some recovery work, then once you've done that recovery work and you're a little bit safer, you can start to allow yourself to be exposed to some of those triggers once more. But you don't just go in blindly, you have a plan for them. And there still will be things that you avoid. So let me give you an example. I mean, I tend to use alcohol as a good example, because most people know a bit about alcoholism, or they know somebody that's, I'm just switching out a heater and I'm starting to cook. Most people kind of understand alcoholism to a degree, or certainly much more than they understand drug addiction or sex addiction or any other form of addiction. And I think that behavioural addictions confuse people a bit more. So alcoholism is quite a good way to give an example. So in the early days of alcohol recovery, you're going to avoid pubs and licensed premises, as we call them in the UK. Like the plague, you're really not going to go in there because there's going to be a strong trigger. There's smells there, it's going to take you right back. After you've been in recovery for a good long time, and if your recovery is solid and stable, there may be times when you do choose to go in pubs. For example, if you're celebrating after a christening with your family, or you might want to go for a meal with your partner, something like that. You have to make a very careful choice about that. And even after a long time in recovery, if you're not having a good day, if you're a bit wobbly, best to avoid it. But by and large, you can expand your exposure to triggers a little bit more as you go, time proceeds in recovery, and more importantly, work proceeds in recovery. So people kind of panic, and they think, when they go into recovery, I can't just avoid everything. I can't avoid this. I can't avoid supermarkets forever. Supermarkets are a trigger. No, you probably can't avoid supermarkets forever, but maybe you can avoid them for a little while, and then reintroduce supermarkets when you're safe, when you're in a stable place. So if you don't avoid something, you have a plan for it. Okay, and the reason you have to have a plan for it, and I'd say a written plan. So start by writing down all your triggers, direct or indirect. Just do a brainstorm list, just as many as you can. Keep the list handy, keep adding to it, because you'll think of a few the first time you sit down and do it, and then you won't think of them all. And then if you return to it after, say, a week, you'll think of a ton more. And then put an M next to them or an A next to them. A is avoid, for now, can be reviewed. M is manage. Okay, and then you don't stop there, because it's no good just saying you're going to manage them. How are you going to manage them? You need to work this out in advance. And you need to know all this in advance. You need to know what's okay and what's not okay in advance, because otherwise you're going to get caught off guard. Because, if you've not decided whether you're going to avoid licensed premises or not, for example, and you wavering on that, but you're probably generally avoiding them, and then you bump into a bunch of mates and they say, oh, you want to come with us to the pub, you're going to be, you need to be like, no, I can't, I'm afraid. Part of my, you don't have to tell people this next bit, but part of my recovery plan for managing triggers and cravings, managing triggers primarily, is I'm not going in pubs at the moment. I say that's your business. You don't have to share that. You can if you want to, but you need to know what the policy is. It's like as human beings, we don't tend to have pre-planned policies on things. Policy is what you're going to do in the case of X. Now, if you work for anyone, if you have an employer or an employer of any size, they will have a whole bunch of policies. So it's like, what do we do? What's the policy if an employee's wife dies? We've got a policy on that. We can give up to X amount of days compassionate leave. Yeah. So your employer doesn't have to think about these things off the top of their head. And you as an employee, you know what the score is, and as an employer, you know what the score is. It's all pre-planned, and that's how you have to be in recovery to an extent. Is am I going to go in pubs? Am I going to drink non-alcoholic, alcoholic beverage? You know what I mean, alcohol-free beer. Am I going to drink that? Because that's a massive trigger. Generally speaking, I don't recommend that to people, but all these things are a choice. So. But if you haven't made that choice, and somebody says, you got out of rehab, you're in recovery from alcohol, I bought you some alcohol-free wine, and it's like, you need to know what your policy is on that, because otherwise you're going to be drinking it before you know it. You need to be saying very good, oh, thanks so much, it's really thoughtful of you, but actually, that's not going to help me, that's going to trigger me, it's something I've decided to avoid. So you need this policy. So the first part of the policy is, the first thing is list all your triggers, and remember that you'll think of more, and you'll get caught out by ones that you hadn't anticipated. That's normal as well. But sometimes when you put a bit of planning into one trigger, the same thing applies to another trigger. So this is one of the reasons why, as recovery goes on, it gets easier, because you learn more and more. You learn more and more tricks, in a way. You learn more and more better ways of managing things. So the first stage is identify your triggers, which you do over a prolonged period, not just in one sitting. Then you put your A or your M next to them. Are you going to avoid them for now, or are you going to manage them? And if you're going to manage them, then you have to decide how. Okay, so let's say, for example, you could put funerals on your list. Okay, I'm hoping you don't have to go to a funeral, but funerals happen from time to time. The older you get, the more funerals you go to, sadly. So let's say funerals is a trigger. So, somebody dies, that's close to you, and you want to go to the funeral. It's meaningful to you, and it feels important for you to be there. So an example of a management plan is, I will make my own way there, so that, and when I'm talking about the funeral, I'm talking about the wake, or the food and drink afterwards that goes on after a funeral, whatever you want to call that. So you might want to say, I'll plan to leave early. I'll tell everybody I'm going to leave early. So when people are drink a bit more and it all gets a bit leery, I'm out of there. You might decide that you're not going to accept a lift there, because if you accept a lift, you can't leave when you want to leave, and if you need to get out early, you need to just go. You can do that if you've got your own transport. You're going to decide what you're going to do when somebody offers you a drink, how you're going to decline that. So you might say, I'll go to drink Coca-Cola. But depending on what friends you've got, someone says, have a real drink. What are you going to say? Have something that you say. And there's a whole video on different ideas of what you can say and how you can say that. But the important thing is you have something. And there are loads of other strategies as well. There are lots of other things you can think about. There may be things like bookending. Check out my video on bookending. You might want to take somebody with you that is willing to go when you go, who'll be a support to you and who'll know what your struggle is. So that's an example of the plan. Now I could talk about loads of different triggers, and I could talk about loads of different plans. And if you've got any questions on this, by all means get in touch, and I'll respond in a video. Because I've worked with a lot of people over a lot of years working on this stuff, and done different plans with people, and I can give you examples of what they look like and that kind of thing. But I don't want to in this video, I don't want to list every single trigger and every single example. This is why doing that piece of work is good to do with like a specialist addictions counsellor, or if you're in a 12-step fellowship, then maybe see if your sponsor can help you do it, that kind of thing. So it's your choice what you put on that list, but there is a lot of accumulated wisdom from recovering addicts past that we can incorporate, so we don't have to make all. We're not in a position now with addiction recovery. We're not in a position now where we have to invent the wheel. We can learn from the relapses and the mistakes of the people that have gone before us. So do get help with this. Don't feel like you've got to do this all on your own. Get professional help, or get help from someone who's been there. So that's what I would recommend, and also just beware that no matter how good your list is, you are going to get caught off guard by certain triggers. So if you're triggered, if you do get triggered, particularly if you get caught out, a good thing to do, a brilliant thing to do, is tell someone. Okay. Because when people will keep it to themselves, and that secrecy builds, that's when they build up for a lapse. But you have to be careful here, because not everyone will understand. Some people, if you tell them that you're triggered, they will see that as a failing. They will see that as that your recovery is wobbly, you're not to be trusted, you're a bad person, and they might give you grief over it, you know. And if your family, you know, partner or your wife or your husband or, you know, whoever, you know, people close to you, it's important to educate them about this. You know, so look, if I ever say I'm triggered, I've been told, you know, and I've learned that it's very wise to disclose that and to tell someone, but it doesn't mean that I'm not doing my recovery properly, or I'm a failure or I'm about to fail. Actually, you know, when you see me say I'm feeling triggered and I'm feeling like a drink, that's when I'm at my, you know, when I'm really on board with my recovery. It's when I keep it to myself that I'm on the wobbly road. So you can educate them, but sometimes family members don't respond to education. In my experience, they have their own agendas often, and it doesn't always work, which is why having a professional that you can contact or a recovery buddy is really important as well. So somebody you can text or phone or whatever it might be and say, oh, you know, I'm feeling wobbly at the moment, I'm feeling like a drink, and they can give you some encouragement. And even just the act of telling somebody, even if they don't respond, it's like, you know, you're no longer in that, you know, it helps take you out of that risky zone. So for all my years in drug and alcohol recovery specifically, the people that said I feel like a drink were always the ones that didn't drink, and the ones that said, oh no, I'm not going to drink or anything, they always did. You could almost guarantee it. So secrecy is a big warning sign as well. So if you keep your trigger a secret, why are you keeping it secret? It's like you're nurturing it, it's the precious, you know, you're kind of, you know, it's like a little egg that you're keeping warm and hope that it hatches. So I hope that helps. There's more that I can say about triggers. Remind me, if you want me to do one on cravings, I mean, I will do one eventually at some point, but you know the way I make videos. When I make what I make when I make it. But if you're feeling like you need that one on cravings sooner, give me a shout and I will do that for you. Or if you have any questions, if you want to talk about specific scenarios or specific aspects of recovery planning, give me a shout and I can respond via video for that. So I hope that's helpful. Applies to any form of addiction. I've only listed a few as, you know, quick easy examples, but you know, it would apply to anything at all, you know, any addictive process. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for all your support. If you've subscribed, if you're a subscriber, thank you very much. If you're not a subscriber, please do that, because that really helps us. Consider being a Patreon, that really helps us. But just like, give us a nice comment, share with friends, all those things help us get this kind of information out to people who benefit from it. We post a lot of kind of weird and wonderful other stuff as well, but this is the core. This kind of thing is what this channel's about and what our mission's about. So I hope that helps, and Rangimarie.